actually a series of videos rather. I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time. I'm going to try to make these videos a little shorter to try to incorporate what I'm doing more in depth. I'm going to be swapping this 7.5 rear end from the V6 for a 96 Mustang GT 8.8 with traction lock. Also, while I'm at it, I'm going to be dropping the fuel tank and revamping my fuel setup. I got to reroute my fuel lines. I've got a pre-filter and post-filter now for my pump. So I need to make a plate to mount all that to, reroute my power wire. Since the car sits so low, I don't want everything being so low to the ground. I've also got some heat shield wrap for the fuel lines, some new AN fittings, and some mounting tabs that will keep everything nice and flush up against the bottom of the car. I have to mount my electronic fuel gauge, and I also have a air fuel ratio gauge that I need to mount so I can button up the interior. And then there's some pinch weld damage on the bottom from somebody jacking the car up using the pinch welds, so I can set my gaps and everything on my fenders properly and put my side skirts back on the way they're supposed to be. So I'm going to do probably a 3-part video for this one, and I've come to a conclusion on this car. I love the car. I've had it a long time, and the practicality of it as a driver doesn't really suit my needs. It's more of a toy car, and it doesn't have air conditioning or heat. Don't really need heat here where I live, so I haven't made that a priority to hook that up, but all I've got to do is run the heater core lines and whatnot, and it'll have heat. I've got some parts here that I'm going to be showing you guys that I'm getting ready to put on the car and get this thing all finished up, and most likely put it up for sale and work on future endeavors. So without further ado, let's get after it. Here's the 96 GT rear end. It is a 8.8 traction lock with 327 gears. Has new seals, friction modifier, and new gear oil. These rear ends are actually a little shorter than the 2004 models by about 1.5 inches, so hopefully it doesn't really affect my wheel fitment, considering I'm running 315s on this. But I don't think that's going to be a major issue, because I plan on robbing the wheels off of this car to put on the 96 GT. But I got some other parts here that I'm going to show you guys real quick before I dig in. So I've got my Holly red pump here. Before I just had a post filter, but now I have a pre-filter. I got my post filter. Some random AN fittings here to modify my fuel lines. Got some fuel line mount brackets here. Some fittings so I can put my electronic fuel gauge inside the car and keep my manual gauge under the hood. I've got a riv nut gun here that's gonna aid me in mounting my fuel line brackets. Also, I have some heat shielding for my fuel lines and a wideband air fuel gauge so I can properly set my air fuel ratio with the carburetor. First things first, we want to get the car up on jack stands. It's super low in the front, so I need to do the front first and then the back. Make sure to set your parking brake, and if you're jacking up the rear first, use some wheel chocks on the front tires. I'm using the rear axe to jack the car up But I'm going to set the jack stand under the subframe and then let the axle hang at full droop before removing the wheels. And with the axle at full droop, you're going to want to get some jack stands underneath it to support. And now we're ready to start dropping the rear end. So with the parking brake still set, you're going to want to remove your drive shaft. This is a 12 millimeter. You have 4 of them. Alright, and for the last one, we'll have to disengage the parking brake, turn the drive shaft, and then re-engage the parking brake to get to that one. Now that we've got the drive shaft out, I've got another jack stand here, and then rest it on that, so it's not hanging on my exhaust. Now we will take the shock loose, and the impact and vice grips are your best friend at this point. And this is a good time to check your shocks, make sure they're good. Put a little bit of tension on the rear end till that bolt gets straight. And we should be able to pull it right out. And then we'll do the next side. Drop the jack, and the rear end will sit right down on top of the jack stands. Now to check your shocks, you want to push up on them, and you want to feel resistance. If there's no resistance and they slide up and they don't come back down, you know they're shot and they need to be replaced. This side, yeah, they're good. Alright, now you'll want to disengage your parking brake and remove your parking brake cable and your caliper. And to remove your parking brake cable, you can grab a hold of this nut and this little lever with a pair of channel locks. Grab this with vice grips and she'll slide right out of there. Alright, now for the caliper, you have two 14 millimeter bolts that holds it to the bracket. And on the 96 to 04 cars, the brake line is not attached to the rear axle, it's actually attached to the body of the car. So what I like to do is use a zip tie, go around the top of the shock, and zip tie the caliper up out of the way while I drop the rear end. Now that you've got your caliper dropped, there is a C-clip, retainer clip, that holds the parking brake cable to the caliper, and you can get at it pretty easily once the caliper's down. And now that that's done, we'll move on to the other side. Now, to drop the rear end out of a 4-link car, you don't need any fancy coil spring compressors or anything. Just put your jack up underneath the lower control arm, put it up till you feel a little bit of tension. And this bolt here is an 18mm, and the nut on the other side is a 21mm. Now we just let the jack down slow. Remove our spring. Now I'll repeat that on the other side. Alright, we got 2 bolts left. Got nut and bolt here, and another one on the opposite side. And it's kind of tight here to get a socket on. So I'm going to use some vice grips and get on this nut, which is an 18mm. The bolt is as well. Alright, got that side. And move over to the other side, and then she'll be out. And there she is, ladies and gentlemen. That's how you drop a rear end out of a 96 to 2004 Mustang. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you on part 2 of this video series.